From the editors of Cook's Illustrated magazine, it's America's Test Kitchen. With your host, Christopher Kimball. Featuring Test Kitchen chefs Julia Collin-Davison, Bridget Lancaster, Becky Hayes, with Adam Reed in the equipment corner and Jack Bishop in the tasting lab. Discover the secrets of America's foremost food testers and tasters today on America's Test Kitchen. Today on America's Test Kitchen, Chris takes a trip to Paris in search of the best croissants. Next, Julia shows Chris how to make foolproof croissants at home. Then, Becky reveals the secrets to flawless crepes. That's all right here on America's Test Kitchen. America's Test Kitchen is brought to you by DCS by Fisher & Paykel. America's cooks rely on innovation and culinary precision. DCS by Fisher & Paykel, offering premium indoor and outdoor kitchen appliances. For over 50 years, Miracle-Gro products have helped home chefs grow fresh vegetables and herbs. Miracle-Gro soils and plant foods provide the essential nutrients plants need to grow bountiful produce. Gardening tips are available online at miraclegrow.com. By Cooking.com, an online retailer for the kitchen enthusiast. If it's not in your kitchen, try ours. Chateau Saint Michel. Digital wine cellar and pairings can be found online. And by Kohler. Diamond Crystal Salt, the gourmet choice. Plum Amazins from Sunsweet.
Have you ever wondered where to get the best croissant in the world? Well, the first place to start would be Paris. That's where I am now. The second place is Eric Kaiser. There's many stores around Paris. We're going to go in and interview the baker here at Eric Kaiser and find out the secrets of making a great French croissant. And I'm here with Alexandre and Sebastien. Sebastien is the master baker here. So I was interested in the number of turns because that's the hard part for home cooks, especially in the United States. So how many turns, how many layers do you get in a croissant at Eric Kaiser?
So in all, it's 32 layers. It's done twice. It's done first with a sheet of dough that is flattened. We put butter on top, put the dough on top of that, flatten that, put the butter again, and that process is repeated. It's done in 2 different levels, and it's a total of 32 layers of dough. After lamination, the dough is cut. We put it in triangular pieces for the rolling. Each triangle is stretched and rolled.
So this is the object of my desire, which is the croissant, the point of all of this. Let's just actually take a little look inside. It's very flaky on the outside. It's buttery. It's not greasy though, and it's nice and soft on the inside, which is what you want. I don't think you get these croissants like this back in the States, but let's head back to America's Test Kitchen. Thanks to Eric Kaiser, we know a little bit more about some of their secrets of making croissant. Let's head into the kitchen with Julia and figure out how we can make croissant at home back in the States. So it's obviously no surprise that in Paris they have great croissants, although they're harder to find than they were 20, 30 years ago. But nobody in Paris in their right mind, unless they're a baker, professional baker, would make them at home, of course, because you go and buy them. Now, the question I have for you is, here at America's Test Kitchen, this is not an easy recipe, let's be honest.
No.
It's time consuming. Why are we making croissant?
Because it's fun.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's you know, the ultimate baking thing. And if you can make a good croissant, man, you got street cred.
But also lots of places in the United States, even in big cities sometimes, it's hard to get a good one.
That's right.
So, 2 reasons. Okay.
So croissant, pretty easy. You have dough, you have a slab of butter, and you wrap the dough around the butter and you roll it out and you fold them and fold it and fold it. So you have very thin layers of dough and butter so that when you make the croissant, the butter melts and forms the steam and you get those flaky layers. All right, so now we're going to start by making the dough. And this is 3 tablespoons of unsalted butter. Now we're going to add whole milk. This is 1 3/4 cups whole milk. We're not going to really heat it. We're going to let the heat in the pan and the butter just warm it through a little bit so that it helps the yeast get started. I'm going to swirl this together, then put it into our mixing bowl. So now we're going to add the yeast, and this is 4 teaspoons of instant yeast, which is also known as rapid rise, and 2 teaspoons of salt, 1/4 cup of sugar, and finally the flour. This is 4 1/4 cups of all-purpose flour. We're gonna put it on a low speed, let the dough come together, and that takes about 2-3 minutes. And then we're only gonna knead it for about a minute longer.
So while she's pulling that dough together, let's talk a little bit more about protein content in flour. Well, of course, cake flour has very low protein content. And they measure content by taking 30 grams of flour and figuring out how much actual protein is in it. Well, this is 8 or 9%, which would be a little under 3 grams of protein per 30 grams of flour. All-purpose tends to be between 10 and 11%, and bread flour runs usually 12 to 13%. Now, there's an exception to this. King Arthur sells an all-purpose flour. It's in every supermarket. That is on the high end of all-purpose. It's 11.8% protein. So it's sort of on the very low end of bread flour and the very high end of all-purpose. We like this because it had enough structure. We actually baked the croissant. They baked up nice, had nice layering, but it was still soft enough to roll out. So all-purpose flour from King Arthur was the one flour we thought was really best for this recipe.
All right, so this dough has come together. Now we're just gonna go up a speed and knead it for only a minute longer. Now you don't want to develop too much gluten at this stage because we're gonna have to roll it out so much. That's when the gluten development happens. And if you do it now, you're gonna need to have muscles of steel to get this to roll out.
Well, I have muscles of steel.
I know.
What are you saying?
But I don't.
Oh, so you're gonna have to do it.
Right. All right, and that's good. Still looks a little bumpy, but that's fine. All the ingredients have been mixed together and the gluten has started to form, which is perfect. And we're gonna cover the bowl with plastic wrap and let this sit and relax at room temperature for about 30 minutes.
Okay.
So this dough has been sitting at room temperature. The yeast has started to react, which is good. And we're gonna press it into, about a 10 by 7 inch rectangle. We're not rolling yet. We're just gently pressing and stretching. You don't wanna really work up the gluten too much because we're really gonna roll it out a lot later. And that should be good. So now we're gonna cover it with plastic wrap. And it's gonna rest in the refrigerator and then the freezer for quite a while. And the refrigerator and the freezer do two things. One, they sort of slow down the action of the yeast, so you have plenty of time to make croissants without the yeast exploding on you.
Okay.
And more importantly, it keeps the dough very cold. And when you roll out croissants, you want the dough to feel like cold clay. And so keeping it in the refrigerator for 2 hours and in the freezer for 30 minutes gets the dough in just the right temperature to start rolling it out. And now it is time to make our butter packet, because of course we're gonna fold the dough around a nice sheet of butter. It's 12 ounces of unsalted butter. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna pound it with a rolling pin, and this really gets it malleable and workable. We're gonna take one sheet, we're gonna pound the second one onto it, and then this third sheet. Now, the interesting thing we learned here when we were doing this in Test Kitchen is that it is much easier to do this with European butter. So we're gonna pound this until it's malleable.
Now I know why you like this recipe, by the way.
This is the best part. And the interesting technique that we came up with is to make an even square of butter that's even throughout, is to use a little parchment packet.
Okay.
And this is a piece of parchment that we folded so that you have
how big is the parchment to start with?
It's about 12 inches to start with,
Okay.
12 inches this way and 24 inches this way.
Right.
What you do is you fold it to make an 8-inch square. And we're gonna put the butter inside this 8-inch square, and that'll be sort of our template for how big the butter should be. And it also keeps it nice and protected in the refrigerator until we need it. So we'll fold the sides back up.
This is kind of like, cooking meets crafts.
Origami.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here we have a nice butter packet. And now with a rolling pin,
Oh, I like this.
yeah, you can just roll it right to the edges and make sure it's nice and even. And starting off with the very square shapes is really important for even layers. And of course, it also keeps the butter cold because we haven't actually touched
that's a good
it with
idea.
our hands.
Let's talk just a minute about those butters again. Now, it turns out that using European-style butters was really crucial to making this recipe, at least making it well. What's the difference? Well, European-style butters are 83% butter fat. American-style, let's say Land O'Lakes, for example, is 80%. Now, 80 to 83% you don't think is a lot, but flip that around and think about the rest of it. The rest of it's water. So you're going from 20% water down to 17%. That's over a 15% drop in water content. That's really important for two reasons. The first is water is really good at gluing layers of dough together. So when you bake up a croissant, a little bit of extra water in there, that's going to keep those layers from puffing up and making that nice flaky croissant. The second thing is that more fat actually makes the dough, in this case the butter, more malleable. That is a little bit more water, it breaks apart, it's not clay-like, it's not putty-like, so more fat makes it much easier to work with.
All right, so here we are ready to merge the dough and the butter. And again, this dough was in the fridge for 2 hours, in the freezer for 30 minutes. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna start by rolling it out to a 17 by 8-inch rectangle. So you can see this dough is nice and firm and quite chilly.
Yeah.
It's like clay. And we're gonna roll it out. I have my trusty ruler. In this recipe, you'll have your ruler around a lot to make sure you get the dimensions right, because that's half the battle here.
The corners, I mean, how do you get the corners squared off?
No, that's a really good question.
I don't know how to do that.
And I'm gonna be doing this a lot, using the ruler and just squaring it off.
So you cheat, in other words.
That's cheating?
Well, no, I mean, you don't do it just with a rolling pin.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
No reason not to use any tool you have to make this a little easier. Now, if your dough starts to warm up or snap back at you, you just fold it up gently and put it in the freezer for, 20 minutes or so, and then give it another shot.
You give it a timeout.
Give it a timeout, that's right. I'm being very exact with these measurements, because our butter, remember, isn't an 8-inch square. So I'm being very careful that this is 8 inches. Now I'm gonna go fetch that butter out of the refrigerator. Here is our chilled piece of butter. We're gonna put this right in the middle of our dough. And we're gonna fold over the sides so that they meet in the middle. And then we're gonna pinch the seam together. And now we begin the process of rolling out the butter and the dough together, which really begins to make those layers that multiply pretty quickly. And roll it out till it measures about 24 inches this way and about 8 inches this way. All right, so now we're gonna seal the butter on either end. You just give it a good press there at the top and the bottom. You're just gonna go up and down. Of course, you wanna keep it as even as possible. And if you find the dough sticking at any point, don't hesitate to put flour underneath there. All right, let's see how we're doing. 18 and 6.
Perfect.
Pretty perfect. All right, so now we're gonna do our first fold. So this is one layer of dough. Now we're gonna fold up the bottom, about a third of the way up, like a business letter, brushing off any flour. Fold down the top. And that's fold one, so now we have 3 layers of dough. And now we're gonna roll it out again. Turn it 90 degrees, a little flour so it doesn't stick. And here we go again, 24 by 8. All right, so this guy is perfect at 24 by 8 inches, and now we're gonna let it really rest before we do the last turn. We're just gonna fold it up gently. We're gonna put it back on this little baking sheet, cover it with plastic wrap, and put it in the freezer for, again, about half an hour before we do that last turn.
Okay.
All right, our little dough's been resting in the freezer for about 30 minutes.
And the first time you rested the first dough, it was 2 hours in the fridge, half an hour in the freezer. That's because the dough was warm after being made.
That's right. We really wanted to chill it thoroughly. This time we're just trying to keep it cold and pliable, and you can see it's now cold again. It feels like that cold clay that we like. So we're gonna put it back on the counter. We're gonna roll it out again, 24 by 8. And this is our last and final turn. And this is when the gluten started to build up because of all the rolling. And this is when it could get a little fight on your hands. Don't hesitate to throw it back into the freezer. It relaxes the gluten and makes it much easier to roll out. All right, so 24 by 8, 18-inch ruler, plus 6. We are good. All right, so we're gonna fold this guy up. We're gonna give him a long chill again before we roll him out and shape the croissants. Okay. Again, 2 hours in the fridge and then another 30 minutes in the freezer. All right, so it's time.
You're so excited.
I know, this is fun. So this is our dough. Of course, we've turned it 3 times, which is 27 layers. And now we're gonna roll it out to a 16 by 18-inch piece so that we can make the croissants. At this point, there's a lot of gluten buildup, and it takes a little bit of arm work to get this to the right dimensions. All right, let's see how far we've come. So 18 by 14, 2 more inches to go. All right, 16.
Done.
So after shaping lots of croissant, we figured the easiest way is to take the dough and fold it in half. And we're gonna measure out 3 inches along the bottom. So every 3 inches, we're gonna make a little nick. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. We're gonna do the same on the top, but we're gonna offset it by 1.5 inches, of course.
Okay.
So we'll do 3, 6, 9, 12,
Well,
15.
that wasn't an of course for me, but okay, you'll explain that in a second. Okay.
This way you get nice triangles. You can use a chef knife, but I think a pizza wheel works the best. We're just gonna go from point to point, and you have a little bit of trim on the edges, and then you just connect the dots. And there you have it. And you can make fun things with these. I make
Like
little
what, Christmas tree decorations?
Yeah, or little palmiers or cookies or something.
Okay.
And then, of course, some of these, half of them, are nice and perfectly ready to be shaped into croissants because you're looking for that triangle shape.
Yep.
But every other one will be a diamond. So we'll simply open up the diamonds and cut them in half in the middle so that we can then shape them into pretty croissants. A little notch in the top.
Yeah.
Right, and you pick it up, you kind of stretch out the ends
Yeah.
like that, and
Okay.
you stretch it long. And then you lay it down,
Yeah.
and you fold it over, and you roll. And you, at the end, I sort of pick it up and roll it around.
I think mine is better looking than yours.
Yours is good. Now
Now what do I do?
Now we put them on the baking sheet,
Yeah.
and you can curve the edges.
See, I did it.
Very nice. I'm gonna do one more. And of course, we're gonna keep doing these and do these in batches. Now this recipe makes 22 croissants, which is a good amount, because if you're gonna go through all this trouble, why not put them in the freezer? And we're only gonna bake off 12, and those are panned up here. And we're gonna let those sit at room temperature till they almost double in size, and that's 2 to 3 hours.
So how long can you keep these in the freezer?
About 2 months. And so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna freeze these until they're solid. So I'm going to cover these with plastic and put them in the freezer until they're good and firm, and then you can sort of condense them into a Ziploc bag. All right, so into the freezer these go, and again, we're going to let those sit on the counter for about 2 to 3 hours.
Okay.
All right, you can see these have really bloomed and they're nice and pudgy, and they're perfect for baking. Now we're going to give them a little bit of an egg wash, and this is egg with a tablespoon of water and just a pinch of salt. You don't have to be perfect with the egg wash. You can get on the parchment paper, and that's fine. But you do want to coat all the dough that's exposed. All right, so these guys are now ready for the oven. And I have the oven preheating at 425 degrees. And I have them on the upper middle and lower middle racks. I'm going to turn the oven down to 400 degrees. So you heat the oven just a little bit higher so you make sure you get that oven spring and you don't lose any heat when you open the door. So they're going to bake in that 400 degree oven for about 20 to 25 minutes. And we're going to switch the racks and rotate them halfway through.
Okay.
Oh, I love that smell.
They look fabulous.
Aren't they gorgeous? All right, grab this too. Thank you for helping me with the oven door. Pull the croissants out and just put them right on the rack and let them cool for about 15 minutes. All right, they've cooled for long enough. It's time to dig in. That's your tray. This is my tray.
Oh, yeah?
Look at those layers. You can really see how they stacked up against one another.
Look at that.
Yeah. Oh. Oh. I love unraveling it as you go. You get the doughy insides and that crisp outside.
This was worth your time and effort.
It was.
I got the best job in the house because I got to stand here and watch you make them. These are really, really excellent. The secret to a great croissant is actually follow the directions, right? This is one of those times when you have to get the measurements right. You got to chill the dough properly. A European-style butter, which is 83% butter fat, is definitely much, much better than using American-style butter. And the other thing you really have to do is use King Arthur all-purpose flour. It has just the right protein content, makes it easier to roll out, but also gives instructions. So there you have it. From America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, a fabulous recipe. Not easy, but a foolproof recipe for fabulous homemade croissant. Oh, these look at that.
Hi, this is Julia Child with a tip on making these little thin French pancakes called crepes.
In her lifetime, Julia Child must have made thousands of crepes. She did it so many times she could probably do it in her sleep. Take the batter, have the nice preheated pan. She had the nice wrist thing going where she could coat the pan. And then 2 minutes later, she had perfect crepe.
This is Julia Child. Bon appetit.
Now, for me, it's different. What's the ratio of flour to milk? Should you let the batter rest? What kind of pan to use? Is the pan preheated? How do you flip it? I have no idea. In fact, this is what I get, undercooked crepe or overcooked crepe. So let's go into the test kitchen with Becky and figure out a foolproof method for making perfect crepe every time. You know, in the last few years, a lot of kids have been watching America's Test Kitchen, and one of them had a mother who wrote in and said, my daughter Abby, age 6, there we go, is an early riser like me, and we often watch T-Vote episodes of America's Test Kitchen before Daddy wakes up. Smart Daddy. She thinks Bridget, Julia, and Becky are very nice to teach Chris how to cook.
Smart
So
little
thank you
girl.
very much for teaching me how to cook. Yes, I appreciate it. So today you're going to teach me how to cook crepe.
Rule number 1, Heat the pan properly. I have a skillet, it's already been heating, and I have a half teaspoon of vegetable oil in the pan. I'd like it to heat for about 10 minutes on low heat. If you just get going right away and start making your crepes, they're likely to get spotty brown, there may be holes in them. It's all because the pan wasn't properly heated. So while the pan is heating, we can get started on the batter. And I have a cup of all-purpose flour, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and just a teaspoon of sugar to give it a little bit of sweetness. And almost all crepe batters are the same. There's not much variation at all in the ingredients. Because there's a very high liquid to flour ratio in this recipe, the type of flour doesn't make really any difference.
It doesn't have time to form gluten.
No, and even if you really whip this batter very vigorously, still you won't overwork it.
So this is an idiot-proof recipe. Nothing matters, right, so far? Anyway.
That's right. Even you can make it.
This is great.
Okay. Now we'll mix together the liquid ingredients. So I have 3 eggs and a 1.5 cups of whole milk. So there's our milk and our eggs. We'll add half of that to the flour. I'm just adding half at a time to make sure that the batter becomes perfectly smooth. And then 2 tablespoons of melted butter.
So do we have to be gentle here? Is this, or we can be cloddish like me?
No, you don't need to be gentle. In fact, a lot of recipes even call for making the batter in a blender. It's impossible to overwork the gluten because there's so much liquid in this recipe. So you don't need to be delicate. You can just go for it. That was easy, right? Okay, so there's our batter. Rule number 2. We're going to test the skillet to make sure that it's come up to the proper temperature. First, I'll wipe out this excess oil. So I'm going to make sure I get a little film on the sides of the pan. And then I had the heat on low for 10 minutes. I'm going to turn it up to medium, and we'll leave it on medium for a minute. It's a good idea to have a timer. It's so important to make sure that your pan is at the proper temperature, because if it's not, we have some examples here of what could happen. Those were clearly made in a pan that was too cool.
You think?
Did you make those?
No, I did not yet.
Those aren't going to have any flavor because there's no browning. In this example, the pan was too hot, and you see you get holes and...
Sort of referred to as giraffe crepe. That's what they look like.
Right. There's our timer. It's been a minute. So now I'll take a teaspoon of batter. I'll just put it in the center of the skillet. My timer again.
You sure that isn't like too much batter? The French are frugal, you know, so...
So I'm timing 20 seconds, and then we'll flip it. Ta-da! That's what we're looking for.
Perfect. Join Becky on our new show next season, Cooking for Little People.
We'll let the pan just come back up for about 10 seconds, and we're ready to go. Rule number 3, add the right amount of batter. So I'm adding a 1/4 cup of batter to a 12-inch skillet. If you add too little batter, of course, it's not going to spread out thin enough. If you add too much, your crepe will be too thick. I'm just twirling the pan around, shaking it a little bit. Put that on the fire. It'll take about 20 or 25 seconds. So the last rule is knowing when to flip this thing. You want the surface of the crepe to be nice and dry. That's 20 seconds. It'll take 20 or 25 seconds. And you want to see a little bit of browning just starting to happen around the edges, which we can see right there. Just loosen. And then we can use our hands to flip it. And now it'll take another 20 seconds on this side.
Okay.
So that's been just about 20 seconds. Flip that guy out. So rule number 1, heat the pan properly. Rule number 2, test the skillet to make sure that it's come up to the proper temperature. Rule number 3, use the proper amount of batter. Rule number 4 is knowing when to flip this thing. And you want to see a little bit of browning just starting to happen around the edges. And you want to put it on the rack so that the air can circulate, because as we make these, we don't want them to stick. And then I set up a whole crepe bar for us.
You know, let's do bananas.
Bananas and a little Nutella on there too? Okay.
I'm just, you know.
You can't go wrong with that.
That's it.
Just fold it over.
Well, it looks good.
Oh, so good. Fold it in quarters.
Mm-hmm.
This
really
is the best
good.
dessert.
Yeah.
They're nice and tender, just a little sweet. You can have fun with all the fillings. These are so good.
So it turns out there are no rules about crepe making, and there are lots of rules about crepe making. The batter itself, you know, it didn't matter. The flour, whisk it, let it rest, none of that really mattered. What did matter was the actual cooking. Test with just a teaspoon of batter, make sure it browns nicely. Use a 1/4 cup, that's 2 ounces. Not too much, too little. And finally, don't flip the crepe until it's exactly right. It's nicely browned and the top is nice and dry. And there you have it, from America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, a foolproof recipe for homemade crepe. You can get this recipe, all the recipes from this season of America's Test Kitchen. Our tastings, our testings, you can watch selected episodes at our website, americastestkitchentv.com, and also follow us on Twitter if you like, or Facebook, or both.
America's Test Kitchen is brought to you by DCS by Fisher & Paykel. America's cooks rely on innovation and culinary precision. DCS by Fisher & Paykel, offering premium indoor and outdoor kitchen appliances.
And by Kohler, inspiring home chefs to create a professional level kitchen with innovative sinks, faucets, and cook centers. Kohler.
And by Diamond Crystal Salt for the professional chef and those who want to cook like one. Diamond Crystal, the gourmet choice. By Cooking.com, an online retailer for the kitchen enthusiast. If it's not in your kitchen, try ours. By Plum Amazins, diced dried plums from Sunsweet for amazing recipes. By Miracle Grow, the gardener's friend. And by Chateau Saint Michel.